It was during the 50s that mainstream music started to find its feet in the world. Again, a new phenomenon, and it didn't take long. In fact, it took about 10 years for the music industry having scenes like that to this hysteria, and that happened basically because of the sexualization of artists at that time, mainly male artists. Elvis Presley is a good example. Now, when you see the absolute hysteria of the fans back then, you've got to wonder why they were like that. Well, there was a whole generation that had just been through a planet-wide war, and they were frustrated. There'd been 5 years of misery, of death, destruction, in some cases people living in a twilight world, younger people who were growing up through the 40s. And it was during the 40s that the first type of underground music started to raise its head, and that was jazz. Seen as a danger to some countries and was actually banned by National Socialist Germany during the 40s, jazz was an underground way of expressing yourself, to sort of forgetting the tension that was going on around the planet with war. Now, the 60s were coming up, and the record companies knew that they could exploit this frustration even more. Now, at the time, the record companies did what record companies are supposed to do, which is sell music on the basis of, good, credible artists, sell records, tapes, concert tickets, all the things the music industry is supposed to do. The drug culture during the 60s was responsible for some of the sexualization. I don't think it was too much the record companies then. But during the 70s, a whole new image was popping up, and it was expressionism, born from the expressionism of the 60s. Artists were getting more daring, and really sort of saying what they wanted to say, but there was anarchy in the air. Punk music was making a sort of a hit, but it missed the boat. People were had enough of the anger and that image. The 80s were coming in, new technology, new ways of thinking, and new images. So this is where you start to see the music and artists changing. Different looks, different ways of expressing yourself, political narratives coming into music. And also you had the so-called phenomenon of the boy band, again aimed solely at the females. The record companies knew that they could make money from this, but they also knew that it didn't have to be the females, it could be the men as well. Now, during the whole of the 90s, people had to suffer this, and I think again they wanted a harder, sort of more credible style of music. So in the 90s you see these live acoustic, bands playing real instruments, and they were really the last ones who held on to that. Bands like Guns N' Roses, Nirvana, The Prodigy, they were still making money for the record companies, and quite innocently. But this is where, it started to change with the advent of, for example, gangster rap coming in, where you would see, artists were talking about what they wanted to talk about. They're using their image and their music to control a narrative. Now, with that come image. So music started to lose its point when it lost its image. And what I mean by that is, if you look at images like this, now, you've got to ask yourself, what has this got to do with music? Sure, dressing up, expressing yourself, the theatrical side of things is great, but it got darker. I mean, I ask you again, what are images like this got to do with someone enjoying a good song? Well, all they want to do is see their artists perform. And the music was really actually getting quite lame and pointless. So the record companies thought, okay, we can use these faces for a whole new type of deal. And so they went to the brands. So you see artists now selling brands like Just Eat and whatever, Nike, this, that. Artists like Katy Perry, who again were using images, not just to be outrageous, but to put ideas into younger generations' head about freedom, expressionism, but it was dark. With the symbology that was coming out as well, this had to be called into question. And there were also scandals coming out with artists. Pizzagate, for an example, and I ask you, what has images like this, or especially images like this, got to do with music? Because they don't. It's a different entity. And when you see the symbology coming in, pandas and butterflies, if you look into it, it's all to do with programming and manipulation. There's a whole planet of bewildered children out there. I mean, culturally bewildered, because they're being told by musicians, the fashion industry, that they can be who they want. They can identify with what they want. So it's really an absolute bomb. Children and teenagers have so much to try to weave their way through today, and you find them playing mental dress up, trying to decide who they want to be, who they want to identify with. And they're being pushed this at such a young age, with the medical companies offering medication to slow the growing process down, to give them more time. Now, look, there has to be a line in the sand, and the music industry have way overstepped it, because when artists are allowed to get away with images like this, and to spout narratives, and basically, this is what your children of any age watch, and it's nothing more than porn. It's got nothing to do with music at all, but they're getting away with it. The children come home and they watch this stuff, and it's all because of the music industry. It's not about selling records. Again, when was the last time you bought a CD or record? You can get it all for free now. So that was it. The hounds were out. And it's still being allowed to continue. And if it does, then the music industry and maybe the planet is going to look really bizarre. It's going to look like that cantina bar from Star Wars, where anything can go. Now, the problem is, when your children go to school and they're behind those gates, they're not yours anymore. Okay, so not only can they listen to whatever music they want, they can talk about what they want, and again, it's just a whole bomb of information for them. So they put up with that all day, they come home from school, and some of them might just want to run upstairs and play on their games console. And again, the music and the images on these consoles are all sponsored by music companies. The teenagers might want to just go down the park, act cool, impress the girls, but while they're down there, they'll be listening to music. They'll be watching music videos. Okay? And it doesn't help when you have so-called celebrities telling the youth of today that they can be who they want. The world is theirs. And to a point, that's a good thing to say, but to make people believe they can be in that realm is just not right. So your children come home and you want to have a chat with them, and they basically turn around and say, I'd rather put a gun to my head than listen to your parents' stuff, because I've had it all day. And they'll go off upstairs and they might listen to more music, and they'll come down in the morning barely recognisable, and the whole thing starts again. The music industry and the fashion industry is not about music anymore. Okay, it's about the narrative that is being pushed currently at the time, and it's one big mincing machine. Don't be fooled that the music industry has anything to do with music now. There's a whole darker thing going on. Let's have a quick wrap up.
So let's just have a quick wrap up. This video basically is more of a warning video. Like I said, the music industry, mainstream music industry, isn't about selling music anymore. It's about selling messages. It did a handshake deal with the brand names, unfortunately, because there's more money to be made there now than the standard that artists can produce these days. So it's more about getting that face recognised, and they'll do that in any way possible, normally in, you know, some sort of scandalous way, or a video or something like that, as you saw with that perverted Sam Smith and Justin Bieber and Ed Sheeran. And well, all I'm saying is, you know, also alongside that is, when your children, no matter how old they are, leave your house and they go through those school gates, they're really not under your control. And at the end of the day, you know, they're coming home, they're tired, they don't really want to hear it. And even if they let you give them the speech, they're probably not listening to half of it. They know it will just keep things quiet. So, yeah, just be careful with what your children listen to these days, and the images that are being put across that, because it's nothing more than selling and programming. That's it. The mainstream music industry stopped selling music a long time ago. Anyway, Scout family, take care. Scout 12, and I'll see you soon.